Malelele, Pulavinaka, Talafalava, and hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Pacific Empowerment Podcast with Akanesika Fusi. I can't believe how time flies. It's the first day of October, so time has gone by so quick, and we only have 2 months left before December. It's been a year, I'm just grateful and thankful to God for looking after me and my family to be able to make it alive and well and healthy into the first day of October, first day of the 10th month of 2025. And not only that, but we celebrated our milestone. I checked out my podcast that's for Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and there has been almost 600 downloads of the podcast since I started earlier this year. So it's crazy. And I want to thank you to everyone who's been watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I want to thank you all for coming with me on this journey, and I'm thankful, I'm grateful, and it's crazy because I'm still going back and forth with the Faikava, and not only the Faikava men, but also the women who are supporting them. Some of them are the bad doa, still coming at me online, and I don't blame them, because no one has been able to speak out against them and to call them out publicly until me. So it's really new to them for someone to call them out publicly. And usually what they do is they attack the person personally. This is why people doesn't speak against them online, because they are afraid of how vicious these fight government can be, as well as these bad doa. And I have to say, I'm gonna start saying bad doa, because there are two types of doa: bad doa and the good doa. So the good doa has been the one who's been supporting me, with my work, and has been giving me their testimonies. So I can be able to help them to stop the sexual harassment, the sexual abuse of women in Faikava. And there are the bad doa, who loves to run away with the married man, who loves to cheat with the married man in Faikava. And they are the one who's been so loud against me, online, on Facebook, trying to attack me. And it's crazy to see how so many of other women that I went to school with and other people I went to school with in Tonga. We went to Queen Salate College together. We went to TTI together, and they are the one very loudest on attacking me online, for this issue. And not only that, I'm also disappointed in my husband's village, Malapo, because I can see they are the ones who's been loudest on trying to damage or tainted my character online, trying digging up my past and making up lies, about me. And I'm okay with everyone coming at me, but to see, my husband's village being this loud, some his families as well. And it's sad to see, because God is exposing my enemies. I can now clearly see that not even families can be trusted. And I'm so grateful, because it doesn't matter how many attacks they try, different angles they try to attack me on. It doesn't even work on me, because I have worked so hard on myself. I love myself enough and accept myself to not feel insecure. What really matters is what I think about me. Doesn't really matter what people think about me. When I go to bed, am I happy about myself? Can I go to sleep peacefully knowing that I did the right thing? I see in many of our Pacific Island people, that's why it's so hard for our people to speak up, because of these kind of attacks online, kind of bullies. But that is why you really need to work on your mental health. You really need to work on your mindset. So you do not have to worry about your reputation, what other people think of you. You need to worry more about your integrity. At the end of the day, it's what you think about yourself. That's all that matters. That's the most important thing. You need to be happy with yourself, with who you are. You need to be satisfied with who you are as a person. You need to be proud of who you are as a person. And that is why I'm still able to fight these men and these women, because I am proud of who I am, of what I'm doing, because I'm not speaking any lies. Everything I've talked about in these issues are all truth. I'm just speaking the truth here. I love how I look. I feel beautiful. And I hope more of our women and our men can have this mentality, because you need to have this kind of strong mentality in order to achieve something big or achieve anything. So I hope my courage is, encouraging our people, more of our people, to stand up for what is right. It doesn't matter if you stand alone. But seeing these people exposing themselves online, I must have hit a nerve. They are exposing themselves for being so angry and so mad about this issue, without them having to think and rethink and sit down and think again. Is Akanesi right? Is our behavior damaging the kava circle as well as the women? We breaking up so many marriages. Is that something that I'm proud of as a Tongan woman? These are the questions that Faikava men and women have to ask. Instead of attacking me, maybe sit down and think, rethink to see if what I'm saying is right. Because what I'm saying is right. I'm speaking the truth. I'm just speaking out what everyone is thinking, because many of our people are too afraid to speak up because of the vicious attacks online. But I think God chose me for this fight because I am strong enough to handle all the criticism and all the vicious attacks online. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that I give a voice to these women and to be able to fight this issue so that our culture can improve. And I wasn't going to read out the rest of the testimonies that I haven't read out of the tou'a and the wives. But somehow our people is still coming at me with the reason that it's because these kalapu are making money. They are helping our Tongan community with the money that they raised in the kalapu. They help provide scholarships. They help families financially. And they are still using that as an excuse. And I'm surprised. Even church ministers are using money, coming at me and using money as an excuse to continue this behavior. So just because the kalapu and the Faikava are helping financially, we need to turn a blind eye to the sexual abuse and the breaking up of many families. I mean, if Jesus comes now, what will be more important? The fundraising and everything, or the sexually abusing of women and cheating on their wives and not being a faithful husband and not fulfilling your duty as a husband? No, that's not good enough. I don't think that's a good enough reason for us to turn a blind eye. The love of money is the root of all evil. The Bible has warned us about this issue. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. By craving it, some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many sorrows. And for those of you who are using money as an excuse, what do you think the other Pacific regions, what about their women? How have they been making money in Fiji, Samoa, Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, if they're not tou'a for money? It's only Tonga. We claim Tonga as the Christian nation. And yet, we treat our women like garbage. We treat our women like rubbish. And some people said it's because it is their free will of these women to come to Faikava. So just because it is their free will to come in tou'a gives you the right to sexually harass them? No, that's a very sad excuse. It is your behavior as a Faikava man to change your behavior. And like I said, the only way to stop the sexually harassed and sexual abuse of women is to remove tou'a completely and only have it in our ceremonial events or courting of the women in their home. Apart from that, tou'a should be removed from the regular kava settings. Kalapu, church, Faikava, anywhere should be removed from that. That is the only solution that will save so many marriages, save so many men from cheating and neglecting their families. It will help the children. So many children are affected by this. The testimonies that I will be reading out today, some of the testimonies are from children who are affected by this issue. It's funny because people attack me, but it doesn't really matter. I don't care if you are trying to dig up my past or trying to dig up the past of my family or my 20th grandparents. I don't care. Nothing you will do or attack me will work on me. I'm telling you that. I don't really care what you do. I will not stop speaking. And with the campaign, we will become louder and louder until the church and the government do something about this issue. Something must be done. We cannot turn a blind eye to this issue. It is time for the church and the government to do something. It is 2025. We are no longer living in the 60s or the 90s. We cannot put culture and tradition before the word of God. God has warned us about that. Anyways, I will read out testimonies because these are some testimonies that I didn't read out in my previous podcast episodes. And because our people are still using money and are still too ignorant to acknowledge this issue and to do something about it, we will keep reading all these testimonies. Testimonies are still open. Tou'a, if you were sexually harassed, sexually abused, please message me with your story. And for the wives of Faikava men, you can send me a story in Tongan or in English. You can send me your story through Messenger or to our email, contact@pacificempowerment.org, so we can add that to our campaign. We are currently collecting all the information we can get, videos, testimonies. And if you see any videos going on around online of tou'a or Faikava, please send it to me or tag me so I can add that on to our campaign. So without further ado, I think I've been talking for so long. Anyways, let's get into it. So this testimony, I'm just going to read it out as they provide it. I will not hide anything. I'll just read it out. But here's the testimony. Hi there. I'm here to tell my mother's story because she's no longer with us to tell it herself. As her daughter, it is my duty to speak for her. When my cousin first reached out and asked I would share her story, I was unsure. Talking about it feels like reopening a wound that has never fully healed in our family. But silence helps no one, and my mother's truth deserves to be heard. I want to be clear, I never had an issue with tou'a, and I do not speak against those who do it. What I hate is the reality of Faikava and Tou when it involves married men who take advantage of vulnerable women. My mother came from Tonga in the late 90s to study at Auckland University. She wasn't on scholarship, she came as a private student. To survive, she became a tou'a to earn bus money and cover her daily needs. She did it secretly because her parents back in Tonga were against it. The way tou'a worked then was that someone she trusted would pick her up and drop her off safely. For my mom, that person was a family friend, someone she called uncle. He was married, and because he was a family man, she felt safe with him. She let her guard down, believing he was there to protect her. But one night after he picked her up for the kalapu and dropped her back home, he betrayed her trust. She was exhausted and fell asleep, and this so-called uncle forced himself onto her. A married man, a family man, and a man who should have protected her, but instead broke her life. She took him to court and she won. I am 27 years old now, and I am the result of that crime he committed. People look at tou'a and point the finger at them, saying they ruin families. But let me say this clearly, it is not the tou'a who breaks families apart. It is the married men who choose to betray their wives, who choose to prey on young women, who choose to cross the line. My mother carried the shame that the Tongan community placed on her. They blamed her, mocked her, judged her, and said it was her fault. Even though mom won with the law, but still our people put her name on dirt. But no one pointed at the married man who abused his position, his vows, and his family. He went home to his wife and children while my mom carried the weight of being judged. But it's okay, she wasn't alone. When she took him to court, 2 other women came forward. They were also tou'a. They were also victims. Different men, same pattern. Just imagine that. This is my mother's story, and I share it because silence only protects those who continue to abuse. It is not tou'a that breaks homes. It is men who cannot honor their homes, their wives, and their community. My mom's voice was silenced too soon, but through me and through you, her truth will live on. And to the wives, y'all should keep your man at home if he's married. Because you ain't know what he's up to at the cover session, especially these married men. Oh my gosh. You know, this is why I let people attack me, so I can be a voice for those who are voiceless. So I can be able to create a platform for the women who have been silenced for too long with their stories. And I know so many Doa who have experienced the same thing. I know so many Doa, so many women who have been sexually abused through Faikava. Similar pattern, See, as you can see here, there were two other women, different men, different Faikava men, same pattern. They were raped as well. And that is why I'm proposing to remove Doa, because that is the only way to keep our women safe. It doesn't matter how much we try to talk these men out to try and get their behavior and get their behavior right. They will continue to abuse and rape our women. So these testimonies, I wasn't going to read it out. But since our people are still too ignorant, I'll read out the stories of people who have been raped by Faikava men. Anyways, this is another testimony of a young woman who was raped after Faikava. I was 18 at the time when my uncle, who wasn't really my uncle, was just someone who my family knew. I grew up with this uncle of mine, and he had asked my dad, who is a Faifekau, and to my surprise, my dad had agreed to it without my permission. I was hesitant to go because a man of the church had been messaging me inappropriately on Facebook, but I felt I had no choice. My dad dropped off to the Kalapu, couldn't stay because whakaapa-apa. My uncle told my dad he'd drop me home, and there I was sitting around the Danoa among mainly married men. One of the men who had sat next to me had told me that he wanted to sleep with me and he would pay $500 because he could tell I was untouched. Just writing that makes me sick to my stomach. However, he had stood up and his wedding ring fell out of his pocket. Instead of someone calling out his behavior, they made it a joke, and he bluntly told my uncle I'm going home with him. And this so called uncle of mine laughed and said, "Not without me." Finally, it hit 5 a.m. I had been sitting there since 7 p.m. and my uncle said, "Kita alo, let's go." And which I replied, "Iyo, yes." On our way home, he didn't take me straight. He pulled up probably 20 minutes away from home at his church car park, and he had placed his hand on my thigh and told me I looked beautiful tonight. And I moved his hand away and uncomfortably smiled. He then forced himself upon me. My body froze and I couldn't move or yell, but just cry as he was talking dirty. And I am 27 now, but I still remember it as if I was right back there. I honestly think there is a difference between culture and tradition, and having a toa is not one of them. I hadn't told anyone about this story, but I appreciate you sharing your voice to speak for those who couldn't. Thank you, Nessie. As you can see, this is a very heartbreaking story. And like I said before, this issue is happening a lot in our Tongan community after Faikava. I think the problem happens usually when Toa gets picked up and dropped off, and also during the Faikava as well. And as you can see, this is the first time ever for her to share her story. How many women, who have been silenced by our community because of the way our community behave, the way they blame women, always blaming women and never holding the men accountable for their actions who committed these crimes. And some of these women, I have spoken to them. They are still able to charge the perpetrators. It doesn't matter how long the crime happens, but I can't force them to. It's up to them if they want to go ahead. But giving them a voice to finally tell their story is a huge thing, just for these women to be able to finally speak up. This is a burden for them to hold for so many years. And it's so funny because people attack me online thinking, why am I attacking the Thai government? They think that I'm attacking the Thai government by exposing the disgusting behaviors that they are doing. See, this kind of mindset, they are always taking the side of the Thai government, never holding them accountable. So it's taboo for us to speak up and hold these men accountable. It just tells you the kind of mindset of our community, and that really needs to change. This is another heartbreaking testimony as well. Hi, Nessie. Thank you so much for giving us a platform where we can share our stories without shame. It means a lot to be seen and heard in a space that feels safe. I've never served kava as a doa, and I've always chosen not to, mainly because of the stories shared by other women, which have deeply resonated with me. My own experience is a little different, but still painful. I can't remember exactly when it began, but I know I was still in primary school, probably around 8 years old. My stepfather, who was full Tongan and very involved in the kava circle, would come home after drinking. At first, he was warm and kind to me and my sisters. I truly looked up to him as a father figure, but over time, that changed. His behavior became inappropriate and deeply confusing for a child. What started as uncomfortable moments escalated into actions that left me feeling trapped, scared, and ashamed. I didn't have the words back then to understand what was happening, let alone explain it. It began with touching, then sneaking into my bed and rubbing up on me to eventually, I'm sure I don't need to share the rest. He made me believe that if I ever told my mom, I'd be the one responsible for tearing our family apart. When I eventually told an auntie, she didn't believe me and called me a liar. His family began shaming and being angakovi towards me, rude. Angakovi means rude. So I left home quietly at 16 and never looked back. It wasn't until I was 20 that I found out he had also mistreated my younger sisters in similar ways. After the separation, things didn't get any better. Several men from his kalapu started making moves, coming over uninvited, trying to sleep with her on my mom, even though most of them were already married themselves. The issue isn't kava itself, it's the behaviors that seem to come with it, and the mindset among some of our Polynesian men who think this kind of behavior is normal or acceptable. Thank you again for creating a space for voices like mine to be heard without judgment. It's incredibly healing. I'm glad these stories are finally coming into light. This isn't the way. This isn't the Tongan way we should be proud of. Now at 28, I still live with the emotional impact. I'm sharing this because the only time those incidents happened was when he had been drinking kava. When sober, he never behaved that way. He was a staunch and scary man. For me, kava became tied to fear, silence, and deep emotional pain. And that's why I choose to keep my distance from it entirely. After everything, my mom and stepdad eventually divorced, not because of what he did to us, but because he had been unfaithful to her with multiple doa. Some of them were even her own cousins, women she had sponsored from the islands and welcomed into our home. As you can see, when I said pedophiles, this is a testimony of a girl who was sexually abused by a Faikava man when he was young. And as she said, this only happens when he drinks kava. And I have a lot of messages from Faikava men saying, is kava a drug? Is kava considered a drug or a herbal? Because why? Because no one gets addicted to kava. Of course, people get addicted to kava. That's why men drink kava all the time and never stay home because of this. And this is what happens. He only did it after drinking kava. So kava is some form of drugs, that change the way you think and behave, and you don't behave as you normally do. But I think because these behaviors that these men are doing have been in their mind, but they can't do it when they are sober. So when they get drunk in kava, that's when the real thoughts, the deep thoughts that's hidden in their mind start coming out. So it's not just because he's drinking kava. These thoughts has been deeply ingrained in their mind, and kava is just, exposing the type of man they are. It's very heartbreaking. So she was molested when she was a child. And that's pedophiles, that's what pedophile means, is men who sexually abuse children. And this is an example of that. Even though she's not a doa, but the behavior of Faikava men is affecting their family members as well because of kava. Okay, this one was, I wasn't supposed to read it out, but I will read it out because I think this is the messed up testimonies we've ever read of tou'a being sexually abused. And uncle is mentioned a lot in this. So uncle is never trusted. So if you're listening and you have an uncle or someone who you call uncle, do not ever trust your kids with them because these problems happens a lot, mostly with uncles and stepdad. Anyways, here is the testimony. Hi Akanesi, my name is. I wanted to share my experiences. Trigger warning. This experience contains sexual assaults on multiple occasions. I am glad that I am able to share my experiences in hopes that many other women will come forward. I am 37, but my story began when I was 17. I was 17 years old and I had just arrived in Sydney, Australia with the promise of being able to have a better life in order to help my parents back home in Tonga. I grew up in church heavily and an active member and faithful servant to God. Everything was going well until 6 months into my stay. My tangata, uncle, who is an active Faikava in the Siasi Wasiliana Ta'ataina Otonga, church minister who was a church minister in the Free Wesleyan Church of Tonga, but is also a part of the Fofoanga Club here in Sydney. He asked my mother if I could tou'a at the kalapu, and if you know anything about the Fofoanga, you know it's palaku. It's disgusting. My mother said no, but after 3 weeks, my tangata had told her, since I wasn't working and only studying, that I need to make money. Somehow to my surprise, my mother, who had disagreed with tou'as her whole life, said yes. And you can imagine my surprise the same day my mother said yes. My tangata stormed into my room and woke me up and told me to get ready, and that a man from church whom I know, said Missy, was coming to pick me to take me to tou'a. I was stunned at the way my tangata told me to get dressed in my best puletasi, and he had asked his wife to do my hair, saying, I want her to look absolutely stunning. I felt disgusted, like as if my tangata really thought I was a doll. He had made me change my puletaha 5 times before Se Missy, a tuata in our church, came to pick me up. Now I didn't know this man, so I had sat in the back seat of the car for my own protection. My tangata smirked at me. I felt like if I had ever seen Setane in real life, that is what his face would look like. He told me, no, I'm coming with you both, so sit in the front, and I seen him winking at Semisi in revision mirror, but I kept quiet and acted like nothing was wrong. Just when I thought I wasn't disgusted enough, Semisi, whose wedding band's hand was very visible, let out a deep groan and told me he has never picked up anyone as beautiful as me coming to the kalapu. He looked back my tangata and asked, "Nake piki koe tahine mei feia, where did you pick her up from?" He smirked. I felt like he had undressed 20 times in his mind. To my tangata said, "Ei, tuku ia ko tahine ko maate ki hoko tahine me anepo," and they both laughed. They were just joking, saying that she's still virgin. And they both laughed. We had finally arrived at the kalapu, but this time it was full. Even while fully clothed, I felt naked. As the hours rolled in, I excused myself. By this time, my legs are dead from since for a long time. I had pins and needles, and stranger who I didn't even know came along and started massaging my legs in front of my tangata. I pushed his hand away and uncomfortably looked at my tangata to help me. My tangata had came over and helped me up. He told me there is a bathroom upstairs that tou'a used to get relief. My guard was up. When I got to the bathroom, Se Missy, the man who I had met in the car a few hours earlier, looked me up and down, and I said tulo. And I had moved around him. It was that moment I became terrified. He grabbed my hair and covered my mouth and pulled me into the bathroom and forcibly kissed me and lifted my dress up and forced his fingers inside me. I didn't know what to do. He still had his hand over my mouth, so my scream became muffled. He was talking palaku, talking disgusting, talking dirty to me, and told me it was okay. His wife understands that he has needs because they have 11 children together. I'm literally shaking typing this to you because although this happened years ago, the scars still remain. He finally let me go and I fell to the floor of the bathroom, and the whole time my faetangata was watching. When I finally saw my faetangata, I cried. My faetangata moved closer towards. I assumed he would embrace me with comfort or even just to tell Etsemisi for what he had done to me, but I was wrong. My faetangata picked me back and gave me a hug. A man who once called me his own daughter had now betrayed my trust. Not just my trust, but my mother's trust. He gave me a hug, but then I felt his hand undo the zipper of my puletaha. I looked at him with fear and he knew I was scared. He told me, "O te ke ili fia ko fe mau ke toko nian ka koe, falala mai ka au." He said, "Don't be afraid. I want to help you. Trust me." I cried, "Ikai ke fe mau ke tokon ko fe mau ke foki ki api." I cried, "I do not need your help. I want to go home." And moved closer to me, and he forcibly kissed and removed my clothes along with Semisi. I had never felt more dirty than this moment. I felt like I was just a piece of meat. They both raped me. I was bleeding because I was virgin. When I went back home with my faetangata, he had told his wife to run a shower for me because I had gotten my book of mahina, my period. I felt his wife knew with just one look, with just one look at her face. I knew she knew something wasn't right. And I was in the bathroom and she asked me, "What did you do?" I didn't say anything. I was embarrassed. And she asked me again in a tone that made me realize she was mad. And I told her what had happened. She said, "Well, you must have done something or acted in a flirtatious way for your own faetangata to want to have sex with you." When I finished having a shower, my faetangata had come into my room. He took my towel away from me this time. I had yelled out. He covered my mouth and told me she left to stay at her cousin's house, and I was all his. And again, he had forced himself on me again. But 6 months later, I told a close friend of mine about what had happened. She held my hand and she said, "Me too, sis." She helped me get through my trauma, and I am glad to say that I am no longer active in this church or in this kalapu. But I will say this to all the ladies who constantly blame the tou'a: please stop. And to all the married men attending Faikava with disgusting thoughts like my own Faitangata and Semisi, I pray every day that your own daughters and nieces never encounter men like you in their lives ever. It's very heartbreaking and it's very uncomfortable. I know this is very taboo, but the only way to get to the truth is to really read out, what happened to these people. The only way to actually make a change is to just expose the truth as it is, no hiding. I don't care about respect. If the respect is making us quiet, to keep quiet and allow these men to keep raping our women and keep sexually abusing our women, we shouldn't be silenced anymore. These kind of cultural respect should be out of the way. It doesn't matter if it's your uncle, but these are men who fight kava, you know. So it's very heartbreaking. It's very heartbreaking for me. And this was the one that was very disturbing to so many of us because we didn't know this kind of evil exists in our community. But I'm so glad that I am giving a voice to these women to finally. Okay, I'm going to read out this one as well. I thought I would take the time to write to you and share mine before I met my ex. I used to tou'a. The first time I did it, it was good, but it didn't last long. If I can go back in time, I wished I'd never tou'a in the first place because it just got worse. They started making up stories about me. That's what entertained them. Doesn't matter if it's a lie or the truth. That's what caught them gossiping. I was sexually assaulted, yet when I told my family, they said to me to smack them with the spoon, to ignore them. They are just joking, making excuses for these fight government behavior. I had one of the fight government show up to my address while my family was working, demanding to come inside my house. Lucky the house was locked and he left 2 hours of me ignoring him, and I told my family. My family warned the fight governments not to show up to our house or they will call the cops. I had many random calls and messages from them, so I had to change my number If anyone wanted to contact me, they will have to call my family. You can't trust no one, not even your family, to save you. I told my family about the Thai government that's sexually assaulting me, how they are disgusting pigs, that they kept harassing me. They still didn't care enough to listen to me. My family just kept making excuses for their disgusting behavior. Every time they call my family phone to ask for me to tou'a, they kept saying yes after how many times I said no to them. I didn't have a voice back then. I was young and I was too scared to say anything. Fast forward to 8 months later, I met my ex. He also drinks kava, but at the time we were dating, he stopped. Once the Faikava boys found out I was dating, they stopped harassing me. Man, my family was pissed at me, but they finally let me be. After a couple months of dating, he went back to drinking kava. I barely saw him during the week. I was working. So many times I have asked him to spend time with me, and he couldn't even do that. People were telling me to let him be. It's just kava, constantly mocking me. And then I thought to myself, man, am I going too crazy? Am I toxic? I was blaming myself because so many of these women let their partners go and kava, and they don't complain, so I let him be. 2 years later, with the same routine of us fighting every day and night about his drinking kava, I found out I was pregnant. I went back home to my family in Sydney. He stayed in Brisbane and worked. During the time I was pregnant, this man didn't come visit me for 8 months. He didn't make the time to call me about my doctor's appointment. Nothing. He only came when I was close to giving birth. After giving birth, I stayed with him. I thought we were going to be one big happy family, but that was just a dream. He went back to his old ways, and only yesterday, after watching your videos and reading the stories you post up, I finally had enough and kicked him out. Now I am free. Thank you again. This is the kind of mindset that our people need to wake up and see that this is a problem. We cannot let our men keep abusing these women. I do not understand, our people. We need to wake up and know as a Christian that these behaviors are not normal. These behaviors are not cultural. It's not okay. It is not okay to consider these type of behaviors normal in our Tongan culture. As a Christian, we shouldn't be accepting these type of behaviors. Why are we still allowing men to behave this way, to abuse our women? I don't understand it. Why do we allow our men to keep abusing our women when we ourselves are Christian? We believe in the Bible, and the Bible doesn't condone this kind of behavior. So why are we condoning this type of behavior if the Bible doesn't condone it? Reading this, it just makes me angry. It makes me angry seeing the kind of excuse that our people and just thinking it's okay. I saw some comments on Facebook saying that my post, it's not facts, that I need to bring facts. All of these are merely my personal assumption. How is this my personal assumption when this is the tou'a themselves and their experience of sexually abusing and sexually harassed in Faikava? How are these my personal assumption? And what more facts do you need? We grew up in Tonga and we knew about this type of issues, these type of abuse and behavior in Faikava. What more facts do you need? Our people are so blind to see that this is not acceptable. This kind of behavior shouldn't be acceptable in the Tongan community, in the culture. Oh my gosh, I can't believe we are in the 20th century. We are in 2025 and we are still talking about this type of behavior that has been normalized for generations. It is time for change. I mean, I'm angry because people think that I'm mad is because my husband goes to Faikava and drink all night, and I'm blaming the tou'a for, because my husband doesn't drink kava. Well, he used to fight kava before when he was single, but when he got married, he stopped drinking kava. So he doesn't go fight kava. He's with me all the time. He doesn't go fight kava. And why am I angry? It's because no one in our community cares enough about these women. Because they always blame the women, never holding the men accountable. They always blame the women. I have to take the criticism. I have to take all the attack, personal attack and everything, so I can be able to help these women who no one cares. No one cares. And it reminds me of that quote by Bob Marley that I saw in the one of the PM at the UN speech. Barbados PM quoted, "How can you be sitting there telling me that you care when every time I look around, the people suffer in the suffering in every way, in everywhere?" There is no one who cares enough to fight for these women, for these issues, to hold these men accountable except me. I mean, I'm not complaining, but I'm just so sick of the mentality of our people. Like we need to do better as a Tongan community, as a Tongan nation. We need to do better. This kind of behaviors are not acceptable. And I'm hoping bringing this to light and with the campaign, because seeing the men still trying to make excuses for their behavior is very disappointing. The only way for a change to be made is to do an official campaign, because even with the stories of these tou'a, our people never learns. They still blame these women. They still say not all men are like that. So, I don't have kids and my husband doesn't fight kava, but I feel so much for these women because I wouldn't want to go through that type of situation, and I wouldn't want any of my family to go through that type of situation. And to see the women in the fight government who attacks me nonstop online, they think they can stop me, but you will never keep me quiet. You will never silence me. The more you attack me, the louder I am going to be. You will never stop me. I'm going to fight this until something is done and changes is to be made within our Tongan community, and with this nonsense tradition should be removed from the kava setting and only reserved for kava ceremonies and courting women in their home. That's it. No more tou'a. This testimony, if you listen to my previous episode of the tou'a testimonies, I read a testimony there of a tou'a who was sexually harassed by a Faikava and his son. And I mentioned there was another testimony of another girl who messaged me after she saw the testimony of the other girl, of the other tou'a. And she said the same thing happened to her. The same Faikava and his son attacked her in the Faikava the same way the other tou'a was. So this is her testimony. I'm going to read it out. Hi Akanesi ke fefehake. I was wondering the last testimony you had happened about the father and son. Did this happen in the certain country? Because I'm also a victim of the same father and son duel. If it is. And I told her yes, and she said, "What, really? Exactly the same thing that happened to her happened to me, but in Feb of 2018. On February of 2018, I went for a holiday to that country. And the house I stayed at was just a family friend's house. And the man there went Faikava. And after a week being there, I was asked if I could tou'a just for that night. Because the other tou'a was busy. And I only had 4 days there before I head back to mainland, Utah. I got to the Kalapu at around 6 p.m. and started. Everything seemed okay for about 4 hours until I had this feeling of wanting to vomit. Yes, vomiting. And I had told the guy next to me, and he told me I can go outside and have a breathe. So I got up and went outside for a breathe. I stayed outside for about 5 minutes and I still feel very off. And so I thought I'll just go back in. Everything was okay, and this uncle that was mentioned told me I can go now. He said, "Saipe ok may osikava. It's okay, it's almost finished." So he walked me to the car with his brother, made sure I got in and drove off. Next day came, I was asked again to tou'a. So I thought, okay, it was kind of fun and funny. And again, 6 p.m. came, I went back. Everything was okay. And the funny feeling came back this time. I felt like I wanted to pass out too. I wasn't sure if it was the air or what, but 2 days in a row of feeling sick was not on. This night, I didn't see the 2 men that took me to the car the night before and didn't take note of anything until after 12 a.m. I noticed a lot of men were leaving one by one, then came down to almost 2 a.m. There was only 2 left. the old man and a younger guy. And the older man got up and walked out. And I told them, I'm going to go too. So as I'm walking out, the lights went off, and the young guy went to pull me in and put a shirt around my mouth and locked my hands with another shirt, and also started kissing on me and putting his hands inside my pants. The old man then came in and closed the door, and I thought I'll play dead and just let loose and pass out. And when I did, they let go. And when they let go, I had managed to get up and run to the door because with them being konakavatonga, I knew they couldn't get far. So I ran to my car and just drove off. And because I didn't know who they were, I couldn't report them until I came back to Utah and I seen a live of my cousin's church, Koniseti. I seen the old man and the son, so I asked my cousin, who are they? And I got sick to my stomach. It was her Faikava and his son, church minister and his son. And I also heard stories that this kalapu has a dark history to it and a lot of secrets held in it. That's probably why we feel what we feel to talk about it. I have reported them to the man I stayed with and seemed like he didn't care. So I had left it and just get my things ready to go back home and never tou'a again. As you can see here, she reported it to the man she stayed with and he didn't care. And this is very common in the Tongan community of tou'a reporting the sexual abuse to their family members, but they didn't care to report it to the police or take them to court or anything. For me, I am not proud of being Tongan if this is what our culture is like. I don't think any Tongan should be proud of their Tongan culture. If this is how we treat our women, if we allow these men to sexually abuse our women and let them get away with it. And to become a church, Faikava, there is no fear of God. Again, there is no fear of God. This is another testimony of a tou'a. It was very popular on TikTok, so I'm going to read it out. I crossed paths with your page and thought I would write to you regarding our experience. I wish and appreciate my identity remains anonymous for privacy reasons. Experiences at tou'a. Due to the rising cost of living, my cousin and I decided to become tou'a as a side income, despite both of us holding full-time professional jobs. Before entering this line of work, we carefully discussed potential risks and scenarios and established clear boundaries and rules, which we strictly followed. Even when working in different kalapu, we maintained the mindset that this was a job and nothing more. It's important to remember the true heart of Faikava. Traditionally, the kava circle is a space of talanoa, of storytelling, fellowship, and cultural exchange. The role of the tou'a was never meant to be one of exploitation or disrespect, but of service and presence, creating balance in the space, carrying conversation, and imparting respect. We approached tou'a work as a performance. We used false names, fabricated nationalities, and even made up professional backgrounds to protect our identities. Although some men in the kalapu recognized us, they remained discreet and we appreciated their silence. The kalapu environment can be compared to walking into a lion's cage, unpredictable and sometimes dangerous. Men of all ages, backgrounds, and statuses were present, ranging from respectful to highly inappropriate. We encountered harassment in various forms, from unwanted comments and physical advances to being followed or stalked. Despite these challenges, we managed to work strategically. We set rates and negotiated hourly pay, earning between $450 and $600 per night. We ensured that once we left the kalapu, we left behind the tou'a persona and returned to our normal professional lives. It saddened me to see how some tou'a were drawn in by men's false promises, and it also pained me to witness how married men spoke and behaved toward us. However, I must acknowledge that not all Faikava men behaved inappropriately. Many were respectful and understanding. Although I would never want my daughters to go through such experiences, being a tou'a shaped me in many ways. It strengthened my resilience, sharpened my judgment, and improved my command of the Tongan language. Most importantly, it reminded me of the value of self-worth and the importance of boundaries. She explained really well how Faikava is like in the community, the environment, and what they went through, and the sexual assault. And talking about self-worth, I don't think any woman should be in the kalapu to reserve the dignity of the Tongan women. They shouldn't be in regular kava settings to be belittled, disrespected, and sexually harassed. I don't think that's right. Oh my gosh, there are so many testimonies. I thought I will read out all the testimonies tonight. I haven't reached the wives of Faikava and testimonies. So I think today we will just stick with the tou'a testimonies for this week. And then next week we'll continue on with the testimonies of the part two of the wives of Faikava men. But this week is a part two of the tou'a testimonies that I didn't read out before. So this is a testimony from New Zealand. Hi Akanesi, I would like to remain anonymous. First and last time I tou'a was in 2005 and I was 18 at the time, still in high school. My father was against tou'a because he knew the culture in that setting. Anyway, he had a family member that came from Tonga and stayed with us. His first cousin loved his kava and went inu kava every weekend. The kalapu he attended was based in North Shore. He had asked my father if I could tou'a and my father said no at first. Then he kept asking and my father ended up saying yes. That night came and I was nervous as hell. I was born and raised in Auckland and I have heard stories of how tou'as get treated. So I tried to prep myself for that night. Lucky my uncle had talked me through and told me not to worry and just act like I could not speak Tongan. My uncle and I got picked up from one of his kava mates from where I resided to North Shore. I felt violated. The way the driver kept looking me up and down was disgusting. We get to the kalapu, we walk in, and there's already a tou'a there, much older than me. She could tell it was my first time and whispered, "Saipe teke saipe, oh you'll be alright." My group consists of married men and single guys. When my uncle was present, I was spoken to respectfully. When he stepped out, the words that came out of the married man's mouth was horrible. One man with a bloody wedding ring says, "Ifotaha inu kava huohumai ki finemui oktekia ilo uli." So he said kava tastes better when it's served by a young woman still virgin. He smiled and looked the other way. One of the men kept staring, so to be polite, I kept smiling back. He then asked if I was blah blah little sister. When I replied yes I am, there was a big shift of the merry man's attitude. It went from being disgusting to respectful. From that moment on, no one spoke to me in a disrespectful manner. I sat there that night thinking, if I wasn't blah blah sister, that night could have went south, cause the comments were truly disturbing. The night ended. When I got home, my father gave me a big hug. I cried and told him what had happened. The comments were truly out the gate. My father promised me he will never let me go tou'a, and since that day, people had asked but he will decline. I think people have lost touch with the reason why Inukava started. Talanoa I hamea ke langa whanua. Talk about community building. I've heard stories from my mom, aunts, and cousins when they used to tou'a in Tonga and how whakalata it was, how fun it was. Asked them if what is happening now has always happened. They all said no, but my aunt said it was different back in their days. Moms and aunts will be present when they used to tou'a and there was no disrespect, just respectful and whakakata, just and jokes. And it was always the single guys, the tanta ever, not like these days, ke ever kakaimali. It was the single guys who were choking and courting the woman, but not married men like these days. Though my experience with tou'a was not to an extreme where I was sexually assaulted, however, my heart goes out to all the victims out there. It's never too late to speak out. Your voice matters, and thank you, Akanesi, giving victims a platform to speak. Maybe this way, victims can heal and try to move on with their life. So this tou'a was lucky that her brother was respected by these Faikava men and that her dad listened to her and declined the request from these Faikava men. I hope more of our people are protective like this because it just breaks my heart when you hear about the family members that doesn't get protected like this. It's just heartbreaking. We should be caring more for these type of issues, for these women, for these victims. Doesn't matter if you experience it or not. You should be caring more. You know, that is what a Christian means. That is what a Christ life like is, to be a voice for the voiceless and defend the weak. Okay, I'll read out one more and then we can end this episode. This testimony is not a tou'a, but she was a minor at that time. She was 16 to 17 years old. And her auntie used to go around in tou'a and she used to take along, and she was a minor. And this is her experience. And I'm so glad that she messaged me with her experience because it was very disturbing. And it relates to, the behavior of these Faikava men. Hi, can this please be anonymous? I was 16 to 17 years old at the time. Fridays after school, I would go sleep over at my mom's sister's place. One of her older daughters in her early 20s would often go doa at Faikava sessions, sometimes in North Shore or South Auckland. I tag along with my auntie because I liked going for the rides. I remember going to Kalapu in South Auckland and the roller door of the garage was open. We'd get there and the men would always go over the time they promised. We'd be waiting outside for half an hour to even an hour longer than expected. While we were waiting, a man in his late 40s or even 50s, clearly not sober, started making inappropriate comments. His speech was slurred and he kept saying to me to come into the garage and sit with him under his blanket because I looked cold. Or he wants to share his blanket with me. He said it in Tongan, trying to make it sound like a joke. Tahine hau ta kafuku sipi. Girl, come so we can share a blanket. Saying I'll be warm if I do, but I was completely disgusted. I was just a young girl, and here was a grown man saying things like that to me. Some of the other Faikava men laughed and made jokes about keeping his hands above the blanket and not under it, and joined in trying to encourage me to go in, saying it was okay and telling me don't be shy. Even the woman who was hosting the Faikava at her house started yelling at me to go in and stop being launoa, saying they were only joking. She tried to shame me by saying I wasn't matingata'a, naughty, and told me not to act fieba'u, not to act naughty just because I didn't want to go inside. She said things like, "You think you're too good for this?" I felt like she was trying to guilt trip me, but I still refused. I just nodded and kept saying, "No, I don't want to." This usually happened when we'd go wait for my cousin to finish. I don't even know why we didn't wait in the car, but I remember it was because they weren't being considerate and kept her bag for way longer than they said. She didn't want to be picked up by them because she knew they'd make her stay longer. Even while waiting outside, I'd hear the things they say to her and amongst themselves. Their conversations were disgusting and uncomfortable. I've been asked to doa for a few kalapus, both mixed age groups and once with my generation, but I've always respectfully declined. For me, it's an intimidating environment to be surrounded by men like that. I can only imagine the kinds of conversations happening inside, and it doesn't sit right with me. I have never really understood the need for a female to be present in a Faikava Kalapu setting, especially knowing how uncomfortable and unsafe it can feel. Hearing of my cousin going to doa, my dad made it clear that he wouldn't allow me to doa and he doesn't drink kava either. I'm grateful for his support and understanding because he knows exactly what those environments can be like. Malo Pito for sharing this talanoa and raising awareness not only for our doers but also for those who have been affected by this. There needs to be real change in how doa are treated in these spaces. We have to break the cycle so this doesn't become the new norm for our next generation. If we want to keep our traditions alive, it must be done respectfully and safely in a way that upholds our core Tongan values. Whakaapa-apa respect because no one should be made to feel disrespected, objectified, or unsafe in cultural spaces. Whewei aki mutual care because we are called to look out for one another, not allow harmful behavior to be normalized. Tauhiva, nurturing sacred relationships because how we treat each other in these spaces reflects the health of our relationships and the future of our community. Lototo'a, humility and courage because it takes courage to speak up and humility to listen and change. No one should feel unsafe or silenced in these spaces. Upholding tradition means protecting our women and youth, not ignoring harmful behaviors, but addressing it with courage and respect. It's sad to see the women who were trying to force this young girl to go inside and join these men. These are the type of women that are attacking me online. These are the enablers. These are the women that allow these men to do these disgusting behaviors while they sit and watch. The minor is under 18 years old. A lot of these testimonies today happened to these women when they were a minor. when they were 16 or 17 years old, you know. It's very disturbing. This is illegal. It's a little frustrating to me reading these stories, just seeing how our community are still laughing about it online, still trying to attack me personally. And that is why I'm starting my nonprofit organization to give these women a safe space for them to turn to when someone is violating their rights, sexually abusing them, sexually harassing them. What do you think the women in Fiji and Samoa and other regions have been doing when coming overseas? They go and clean houses, take a course or something. This day and age, I don't think women tou'a should exist. Our Tongan women should be able to find a good job elsewhere. Because women in Fiji and other regions, Samoa and other regions, are able to find job for decades because they didn't have tou'a. So why are we still using money as an excuse? It shouldn't be an excuse. There are better jobs and better opportunities. And that is why the Chinese are taking over Tonga, because our people are too busy drinking kava every day, abusing the kava addiction and cheating with the tou'a while the Chinese come and take over the land. I think with people being mad about Chinese coming to take over Tonga, don't be mad at the government. Be mad at yourself for not working too hard like the Chinese to keep your land. Maybe there should be a closing time for the kalapu and Faikava, just like the nightclub, by 1 a.m. close, so men can go back to their families and spend time with their families. The days of drinking kava until daylight is done, is gone, should be gone. Men should take more responsibility by looking after and providing for their families instead of wasting so much time. Read a book or take a course or go to the bush and plant taro or cassava there. Make use of your time and help your family and spend time with your wife and your children. But yeah, we will finish this episode for this week. I hope you are able to learn something and really listen to understand, and do not listen just to respond, but really listen to understand and see how we can work together to stop this issue, because we cannot let it go any longer. We will keep raising it until something is done about this issue. I hope our Tongan parents who are listening will stop sending your daughters to family members overseas to go and doa. Send them to the seasonal workers instead so they can go and pick fruits. That is a more useful job than sending them to go and doa. Anyways, I think that's it for now. Thank you very much for listening and for watching, and I will talk to you next week, same time, same place. Thank you very much. Malo apito, favetai lava, nakavakalevu, and have a great week.